Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast. I'm your host, Troy, and we are excited to be getting into a kind of a new area, a new angle, a new venture, if you will, a new process with the Pastured Pig Podcast. So, as you may be aware, if you're watching this, and by watching, yes, I did say the word watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you're seeing our inaugural video episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. So obviously still going to be working out the kinks, ironing out some wrinkles here. But we're kind of changing the format of this up a little bit. And this not only goes through the podcast, but also goes through our Patreon supporters as well. We're kind of doing a change. So let me explain this new format real quick before we get into our interview discussion. Number one, we are now including a video podcast version to share on our YouTube channel. So we're seeing more and more emphasis placed on video podcast. Now, it's not like we're going to be out in a pasture with the camera. We're just going to be doing this interview with visuals now. So you'll actually be able to see the guests, you'll be able to see me, the host, and be able to have some of those visuals. If the interview requires specific visuals, then in post-production editing, then I'll be able to drop those in. So if somebody's talking about a specific setup or specific construction, and we can get either video clips or stills of that, then we'll drop that in. So that could possibly enhance that. Now, for those of you listening, I'm trying to keep all that in mind as well. If you're listening to a standard audio podcast feed, then obviously visuals aren't going to work. So any visuals that we have that we think are germane to the conversation, then we'll try to incorporate those over on the Pastured Pig website. The goal is to take each episode that we do of the podcast and at least have some post related to that on the pasturedpig.com. And we'll get into that more here in the next several episodes. I'm still testing some technology and obviously making sure that it falls within the budget associated with this whole endeavor, because I don't want to obviously outkick my coverage and promising you guys more than we can financially deliver. So that's the first thing. And the other thing I mentioned, we're restructuring Patreon, and I really appreciate all the supporters that have been involved in that over the years, and it's really helped me make this step. Actually, it's allowed me to finance some of the things that we need, and it just kind of gives me a reassurance that you guys out there like the podcast, you're finding value in it, and you're showing me that you find value in it, of course, by parting with your hard-earned money, and I appreciate that to all of our supporters. So what we're doing is restructuring. We still have our 3-tier groups, and that's the Piglet tier, which is just $5 a month, and that's a general support thing. If you want to say, hey, Troy, it's kind of like a digital tip. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I'm going to drop $5 in the tip jar each month so you can just keep the podcast going. The Sal tier is our $10 tier, and what that's going to get you access to is go straight to our interviews. I understand, and it doesn't offend me at all because I kind of do the same thing, but I understand that some of you guys listen to the podcast on 1x speed because our podcasts kind of go long, 40 minutes to an hour, and you say, well, I want to get through this, and I don't want to bust this up into multiple days, or my commute's X, so I want to be able to handle it through that time frame. So you listen to it on 1x. Or 1.5x, maybe even 2x. I talk a little fast, so maybe you can't get away with 2x. But what we want to do is we want to be sensitive to that. So if you're at the SAL level or greater, then what we'll do is we're going to go straight to the interview. So we're just going to have our pre-recorded intro, which is Kelly, welcoming you to the podcast. We're going straight to the interview, and then we'll have our pre-recorded outro. So we're not going to have any of these bumpers, which is technically what you're listening to right now. This is one of the bumpers. We're not going to have any of the bumpers. So if you're at the SAL level, those will be posted on the Patreon feed. You can listen to those. You can actually listen to those from the Patreon app. So just add that app, just like you would iTunes or anything else. And you can listen to that ad-free. It's also not going to have the ads that Podbean drops in there. So it's going to be bumper-free from Troy and his foolishness. And it's also going to be ad-free from Podbean, our podcast server that throws in ads there as well. So you'll be able to skip all of that stuff, get right into the meat of the conversation, and be able to plow through that. So we thought, kind of based upon feedback, we thought that would be a good opportunity to provide that. Now at the board level, which is $15 a month, you get everything. You get the commercial-free audio, but you'll also get commercial-free video. So it'll be basically the same thing, but it'll be our YouTube feed minus the bumpers. We'll go straight into the recording, the interview recording, and you won't have my bumpers. You won't hear sponsors or featured products that we have, and you also won't have YouTube ads popping up like you would watching it on a regular YouTube feed. So it basically just allows you to cut straight to the meat and not have to go through all the things that help us pay the bills, of course. So we've restructured that, so be sure to check that out. If you're already a Patreon supporter, nothing's changed there for you. Things will still be going the way they're going. But if you decide to join us, then those are the options that you have. And as we get into more things, like I said, as I kind of iron out these wrinkles, then we may be adding more features as well. But we'll announce that as we go along. But speaking of Patreon, and I want to do this, I really want to recognize those that have really been super supportive. And I'm going to start today with our board here. And I want to at least mention our board here each time. It's just a handful of people. And man, I really appreciate these individuals sticking in, parting with that money, and really helping us invest in the podcast. So those are Kyle Hood, John Mosher, Mark Purcell, David Jones Beam III, Tina Vialard, sorry Tina, Chuck Lewis, Fritz Seabolt, and Noah West. And I wanted to give a specific shout out to Noah West. Noah, he's been supporting the podcast pretty much since day one, since we had the opportunity to support us. And so he's hung in there since day one. Noah, thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it. You and I have had a lot of conversations in some of the individual chat things and stuff. And I really appreciate your support. Appreciate everybody's support, but definitely want to give a shout out to these people and specifically. Well, another thing that's part of our bumpers, of course, is I want to try to include updates because obviously we have a pig operation here as well from time to time. Sometimes I wonder if we do or not. So I want to make sure to include those updates. You guys can kind of understand what we've got going on. I get some questions sometimes. Hey, what's happening with the pigs on your place? So updates, really we're kind of in a lull. This is kind of a low point when it comes to all things piggery on our property, simply because we are phasing out. We're kind of waiting for spring. We're phasing out our breed stock that we have. So our large black Tamworth Cross, they will be taking the final ride to freezer camp sometime this winter. We want to get that scheduled once cold weather comes. And then, I don't even know how to say this. We'll get into the details. So we've got Merida, who's over 9 years old, and she's not going to freezer camp. She's also developing a lot of arthritis in her front trotters. She actually, when she eats from a bowl or trough, she has to kneel down. She's just getting slow. You know, as you know, pig never stops growing, so that's kind of catching up with her. I've definitely tried to cut back her feed to keep her weight down so that it doesn't cause issues. So she's just an old-looking pig. So, but she needs to go as well because I need to start completely fresh on the farm. So may have to old yeller her. May just take her for a walk up in the woods and say goodbye to her and do that type of thing. Some of you guys may be freaking out, but that's just kind of the way of the farm, and that's the way we'll do it. She's had a much longer life on this farm than she was supposed to, and the reason why is she just wouldn't get on the trailer day one. And I thought, okay, that pig is that smart to know to hit the hill and not come anywhere near, even if she hadn't been fed for a couple days, not to come near the loading trailer. And she did that 3 times. It's like, okay, you get a pass, you get to hang out. So she's out of her 9 years, she's 8 years further along than she should be. But that's our plan. Now, as far as what are we switching to genetic wise, breed wise, I'm really not sure. I'm still kind of exploring that. I think we're definitely going to go back to AI if we're going to do any farrowing in the near future. Just the scale that we're doing, it just doesn't make sense for us to keep boars on hand and feed them. So when we get rid of our boars, we're not going to bring that back on. We'll probably go back to doing AI if we do any farrowing. And maybe just this next year, as we try new breeds, we may not look to try to replicate those breeds as we're buying from individual farms. It also gives me a chance to obviously get product from other farms and meet those people if I haven't met them or they haven't been on the podcast yet. So what we're going to do in the off time, so in betwixt having no pigs on the farm and getting our new piglets this spring, Of course, we're going to take this winter break and we're going to do some infrastructure improvement. So we're going to kind of move some things around. My old sorting corral is getting a little long in the tooth, so it needs to be updated. I want to build a new training area that's portable, or at least can be broken down, because as you guys know, we have premium on flat land. So if I bring in piglets, I want to be able to set up the training pen quickly, train them, get them on pasture, and then tear that pen back down. So looking to do some modular things there. And of course, we also want to just continue expanding our woodlot setup. I use pasture all the time, but really it's a woodlot operation. So maybe opening up the canopy some more, taking out select trees to let more sunlight in, just kind of expanding that, and kind of going back and doing some repairs. I know there's some areas that fence needs to be repaired, or we need to incorporate some new areas there. And I don't know, I'd like to work on some impoundments. We're supposed to be doing that this fall, but we've just run out of time. And it's just not in the budget right now to bring in any heavy equipment to do any impoundment work. So we may have to punt on that until 2025. Okay, so another segment that we're going to incorporate in these bumpers is a featured product or a sponsor. Really trying to, again, double down on to pursue the longevity of the Pastured Pig podcast. I'd like to get to where it's revenue positive. When it comes to time and equipment and all the things that we have to pay monthly. So we will be doing some featured products that we feel that are pertinent to either pastured pigs specifically or farm life. Be some of these things that carry over from Red Tool House, but other things that are specific to the pastured pig. So one thing that we want to introduce this time, and we just got back from the Homesteaders of America conference, and Kelly and I were blown away by this product called Rock Pot. In fact, we were blown away by it so much we bought one, and we quickly signed up for affiliate and got to know the owner pretty well, and looking to do some additional partnership work in the future. But what this thing is, it's basically a portable slow cooker. So imagine a crock pot that doesn't require any electricity, doesn't require any gas, doesn't require any combustion of any type, which is pretty cool. The concept is that you heat, it's a thermal battery type thing. You heat this stone, you get that stone up to about 700 degrees. You can heat it on your stovetop, your wood burning stove, or you can toss it in a campfire. You get it up to 700 degrees, you place it in the bottom of this vacuum insulated stainless steel container with a sealed lid, and you place whatever you're cooking in there. And depending on the type of accessories you get, you can put like a pork roast. That's what we're looking at. They have a nice pork roast in the bottom of it. Top tray, maybe you've got some of your vegetables in there. Seal it up, toss it in the carrying case, and you can take it with you. So if you're tailgating, if you're doing that type of stuff, you don't have to worry about plugging in. You don't have to worry about the stuff getting cold. Fred, the owner, he was showing us that his rock pot that he had set up there on display, he set it up at 6:30 in the morning, put a pork roast with some potatoes and carrots, and even 3 in the afternoon he cracks the lid on it and the steam's still rolling out of it. So pretty slick. We're really excited about it, not only for the road type of stuff, because we're trying to eat cleaner, so we don't want to eat out as much, so we try to take as much food with us from the farm as we go. So this is really going to help keep that ambition alive. But then also up at camp, where we're off-grid, we have solar power, so if we're not going to be doing cast iron cooking because maybe we're out enjoying the river or doing a ride or something like that, then we can get this thing fired up on the wood-burning stove, toss it in the campfire, get it ready, and then as we go do our thing, we've got this thing cooking it at the cabin, and we don't have to worry about draining our battery system, our off-grid solar system, and we don't have to worry about possibly any fire danger there if we had something over the stove, over the wood-burning stove cooking in the cold months. So it's pretty slick. And as I mentioned, we did set up an affiliate link, so I'm going to put a link below in the show notes. So if you want to check it out, if you do happen to buy one, of course, we get a small commission from that. And of course, that just helps support the podcast. So really neat thing. Check that out. So as far as the line of featured product or sponsors, if you know anybody or you want us to take a look at a product or feature something like that, really if you're looking for somebody to, or if you're looking to sponsor, you want your farm sponsored on here for some reason, or you know somebody that has a good product that possibly like to sponsor, by all means, just reach out to me, Troy at redtoolhouse.com. We can get some discussion. I can send you send the individual a media deck so you can kind of see our pricing structure and how we do all that. Well, all right. Well, let's get into our episode now. So, who we're talking to today? This is kind of a little different as well. So we're kind of changing up. Even this is not a pork producer. This is actually a Austin is with Trees for Grazers, and it's a business consulting system service for Silvopasture, incorporating Silvopasture not only in the ruminant area, but they're also venturing over into pastured pigs. And that's why we decided to have him on the podcast, because their effort to go over into pastured pigs. And if you guys have listened to the podcast for a while, or you followed our channel for a while, you know I'm a big fan of Silvopasture. And we're taking it from the side of removing trees to open up more canopy. What Austin's dealing with is for people that maybe have a lot of cleared land already, and he's encouraged them to start introducing trees, and designing species selection, all of that type of stuff is super key to that. So I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Really good stuff we get into, kind of go deep into it, but I think it's worth the listen. So hope you enjoy, and we'll catch you guys on the tail end. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. I'm your host, Troy, and today we're going to do something a little different. Today, I'm talking with Austin Unruh of Trees for Grazers. Welcome, Austin.
Thanks for having me, Troy.
All right, so this is a little different. Obviously, you're not a pastured pig producer, but you're on the podcast because there's a lot of relevancy in what we're going to talk about today when it comes to pastured pigs, or like we have here, woodlot pigs. So first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself and about your business, and then let's dive into kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about with silvopasture and agroforestry.
You bet. So I run a company called Trees for Grazers, and as the name suggests, we specialize in working with farmers to integrate trees into their pastures. So we're based out of southeastern Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, if people are familiar with that. We're a big Amish and Mennonite area, a lot of small dairies in our region. And so we've been planting trees into pastures for about 4 years now. And we've worked with close to 50 farmers to do this kind of silvopasture projects, where mostly because of our area, we're working with dairy farmers. And we are working with them to integrate trees into their pastures for shade, for feed, for conservation benefits. And then more and more as we're going forward, we're looking at serving other livestock types as well. And pastured pigs is one that we're really gearing up for.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we talked a little bit before we started the recording here that I'm a big fan. Those that have listened to the podcast know that we've talked about this to some degree. So I'm a big fan of this concept, and really was excited when Austin reached out to me about coming on, and just to take it from the neophyte level of understanding that I have to guys that are doing this professionally, I think is going to be really exciting and ramp it up. So, Austin, tell me a little bit about your team, because it's not just you, right? You got a pretty good team put together.
We do have a pretty good team. Yep. It started out with just me about 4 years ago. It was just me doing the silvopasture and trying to figure out, and I quickly decided, you know what, there's too much here, too much to specialize in, too much that needs done for me to do it by myself. So then I started to form a team over time, and now we have a team of 8 people. And we have a consulting team. We have an implementation and project management team that does the plantings and then does the maintenance of those trees once they've been planted. And then we have a nursery team as well. So our goal is to make it as easy as possible for farmers to say yes to silvopasture, recognizing most farmers don't have the time, the money, the energy to invest in something that's not going to pay them back for 5 years or more. So that's why we've put together a team that can bring in all of those, the necessary skill sets in order to make this happen for folks.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a regional aspect to the business, of course. You guys being hands-on, boots on the ground, and even follow up doing maintenance. So there's probably a geographic circle that you guys stay within. But then when it comes to consulting services and those type of things, then that geographic circle, that region can probably spread out pretty far, I would assume.
Exactly. Yep. Especially with a video consult, we can work with anyone.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. I was going through the website. You've got it, and we'll definitely link in the show notes for you guys listening, that the very robust website, a lot of good information, really nice blog section there where they get into some of the, deep into the weeds about some of these things.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun.
Yep.
Which is really good. In perusing that, seeing some good information there. And I got to say, your team, I just wonder, is a prerequisite that you guys all have to have killer beards, because
Yes, we do. Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Yep. It is absolutely requisite. If someone doesn't have a beard before, we give them a little pin on beard.
yeah, that would be
Yeah.
me. I
Yeah.
definitely would have a elite press on beard, because I can't do that. Well, great. So let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about silvopasture and
Let's do
agroforestry.
that.
We throw that term out a lot, and I think I don't know, there's a lot of misinformation about it, but I think it's
Mm.
important just to define it to make sure we all are on the same page as we move forward here.
Perfect. Yes. So agroforestry is going to be your broader term. And what agroforestry is anywhere that we're integrating trees and forestry into the agricultural space. So there's 5 main practices. Let's see if I can remember them all offhand. So silvopasture is one of them. Alley cropping is where we're integrating tree crops like chestnuts or even like walnuts for timber, and agricultural crops like whatever your row crops are. There's forest farming, where we're growing uh, often food stuff underneath a closed canopy. And then we have windbreaks, which people are familiar with, and riparian buffers. So stream buffers for conservation practices. And I actually got my start in riparian buffers. I'm here in southeastern Pennsylvania, where we have a lot of pollution going down to the Chesapeake Bay. And so there's a lot of conservation funding available here for stream cleanup. So that's how I got my professional start in agroforestry. And pretty soon I started to work with folks who were doing grass-fed beef or grass-fed dairy, and they were interested in getting trees established in their pastures. So that was the beginning of our foray into silvopasture. And so silvopasture is really just the integration of trees, livestock, and forages. And you want to be intentional about how you do that. But you can do that in a million different ways, right? So there's anything from the Dehesa region in Spain, where they have oaks and pigs and ruminants, to in your situation where you might have more of a closed canopy woods that you're looking to thin to create a silvopasture. At Trees for Grazers, our main focus is planting trees into open pastures. That's partially driven by our context. We're in an area where land goes for $30,000 to $50,000 an acre. There is no grown-up scrub land in this area to be thinned out. It's all open farmland or open pasture, and it's been that way for the last 200 years. So the need in our area is integrating trees for shade and then additional benefits. But you can have it both ways. You can create silvopasture by taking an existing woodlot and thinning it, or by taking an existing open area and planting trees into it. What I really like about planting trees into an open pasture is it gives us complete flexibility to decide what trees we're going to put in, not only what species, but also what genetics can we select to put in there that are really specific to that farm and their goals. We can choose our layout. So rather than having a random woods and the trees are just randomly spaced, we can put them in rows, we can put them in grids, we can put them on contour, however we want to do it, so that it makes sense for the running of that farm business. And that really allows us to create an agricultural system, a silvopastoral system that is uniquely suited to the 21st century and our needs of farmers now, and to machinery and mowers and whatever else you need to access this area with, we can create a system that just works really nicely.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love, yeah, obviously pros and cons of both of those angles. And as you mentioned, yeah, we're on the opposite side where we're thin in canopy. But yeah, I just love the engineering aspect of it, the design aspect, because I don't know how many times I've been in the woods working in an area. It's like, wow, I really want that oak tree to stay because it's really going to produce canopy, especially as I open up around, it's going to spread out. But it's like,
Hmm.
I wish it was about 10 feet this way, or
Yep.
just over here beside this stream area or by this embankment type of thing. But yeah, so in that situation, as you mentioned, being able to kind of craft and design based upon, and I like what you said, because I don't think a lot of people take it to this degree and looking to say, well, yeah, I want a tree in the pasture that's going to produce this much mast and is going to provide shade, whatever the case
Hmm.
may be,
Hmm.
but not thinking about the layout when it comes to how you're going to manage the animals through it, but even
Yeah.
the equipment. So if you've got
Hmm.
equipment in here and it's like, okay, if I plant these trees X amount of feet apart, can I still get a piece of equipment through here to
Exactly.
do some of the maintenance? And so it could be one of those things where we're talking with somebody like you guys that have experienced in layout. We just don't know what we don't know until we talk to somebody that's done it a lot and say, hey, well, that's a great idea. But if you move this here and put this here, then you're going to get advantage A, B, and C from that. So I think that's
Exactly.
key.
Yep. Yep. I was just working with a farm recently where they had worked with a nursery that had done a little bit of consulting with them in order to establish a silvopasture. And the trees looked great. They were in their third year. The trees were establishing nicely, but the problem was they had laid out the trees randomly. And so they weren't able to come in there. They weren't able to graze it because they hadn't protected the trees from livestock, which we can do pretty simply. We have some pretty simple, cost-effective methods of doing that. And then they hadn't laid them out in rows. So then when it came time to mow, then they're dodging and ducking through all these trees, and it's just a nightmare. And they can't get livestock in there for another couple of years because it's not laid out in a way to protect them effectively with electric fencing. And so it was a really nice planting in terms of the tree growth, and that little tweak of let's plant them in rows and then use electric fencing to keep livestock off of these tree tubes. That would have made a world of a difference. So it's oftentimes those small tweaks. It's useful to have someone who's done this quite a few times.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, what a great, and especially with what we're talking about here, we're talking about something that's not going to happen overnight. It's not something you're just going to pull up and move around. So if you're going to make that investment of time and money, and then wait to see 5 years, 10 years down the road the real return on investment
Yep.
there, my goodness, your due diligence on the front end is a no-brainer to say, hey, let's get some other opinions on this. Let's get some ideas on this to make sure we're not going to stub our toe and 2 years in have to dig everything up or start cutting
Yep.
things down, or realize
Hmm.
I can't put my livestock in there, or if I do, I'm going to lose 50% of what I've invested in just to
Absolutely.
graze and browse those type of things.
Yep, and that's the case for both planting trees. If you plant a tree in a pasture, those are going to be there for quite a while. But I'd say even more so on a thinning job. Like if someone were to come in and they're looking to bring in a forester, or they're looking to bring in or even use their livestock as the management tool. I was talking to someone recently who said we had a stand of pine that we wanted to clear out. We wanted to clear out some of the trees, and we wanted to use our hogs to kill like some of the trees, but not all of them. Well, he said, by the time we saw that some of them were dying, it was too late, and the rest of them were dying as well.
Right.
So we brought those pigs in. They were maybe a little bit too hard on them, and it was an imprecise tool. It didn't do what we wanted them to. And similar with if you have a commercial thinning, a logger come in, that's a one-time operation. Like you only get that chance to bring in a logger onto your woods probably once in a generation. So you really need a thoughtful consultant in that case who knows trees, knows logging, and ideally someone who knows forages and livestock too, who can look at it with all of those different lenses and help you make decisions that are going to benefit your woods for the long term and also be nice to integrate livestock into, because it's a big job, and there's a lot of money tied up into it. And once those trees are gone, a big tree is going to be 30 years till that grows back.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think back 24 years ago when I had our 100 acres here timbered, definitely not thinking about any of that stuff. I was just looking to say, okay, I need money to fund the purchase of this property. So
Hmm.
guys come in and do what you do. Obviously, don't destroy the place. And I remember specifically, anecdotally telling the loggers, okay, basically everything. Yeah, we did a select cut 16-inch diameter and up. Had a forester come in, he marked everything. So all of that was above board. But I
Hmm.
remember telling the guys, the logging guys, like, there's only 3 trees on the entire 100 acres that I'm concerned about.
Hmm.
3 beautiful mature walnuts in the center little valley. It's the area we call the retreat. And those 3 walnuts were just pristine. And I said, "You're going to fell these trees around it. Just be wary of those walnuts." And they, yeah, we'll do our best. Well, they killed every single one of them because
Ah,
yeah, they're just in there dropping trees. They don't
yeah.
they're not looking at it from a standpoint of, okay, how do we take this out? There are already rules that they have to follow, all these restrictions and regulations, so they're just following
Hmm.
that. But they're not considering, some of the more broad options. So I would
Hmm.
assume even when you guys come in and consult for thinning operations, that I would assume there's some vetting of who's actually going to come do that work. Yeah, if you're saying, hey, just don't get Joe Schmo logger, let's get somebody in here that we can talk with and actually get a game plan together to make sure that not only are they taking what we want, but taking it in a manner and maybe installing infrastructure in a way
Hmm.
that it makes sense.
Hmm.
Doing skid roads, then put those skid roads in a certain place so that way pasture layout and woodlot layout makes more sense.
Exactly. I wish we consulted on loggings. At this point, we don't have the staff to do that. But in the next couple of years, I would love to have someone either on staff or someone that we can refer people to who can travel and cover a lot of distance, because there is a real need for this. And it is a very specific skill set and experience set in order to consult on, especially having that diverse knowledge base of recognizing the needs of the forestry side of things and the economics there, and the silvopasture livestock and forage side is a very rare combination to have. So that's something that we want to be able to refer people to in the coming years. And you're right that you would have to be very thoughtful about who you select to do the logging operation, and you need to keep a very thoughtful watch out for them, because there's horror stories out there of people just getting fleeced by loggers.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's why we had a broker come in and that worked out really well to our advantage. But because when the logging crew came in, and this is not to stereotype or disparage logging guys. I know a lot of guys that are
Mhm.
that are good loggers and good responsible individuals, but these poor fellas, they I don't know where they came from, but they would get so drunk by the end of the day,
Ooh, ooh,
they'd have to hold on to the edge of the forest to keep from falling out of it.
ooh. That's a bad deal.
They took out my mailbox a couple times, taking a truck out. But yeah, these guys, the actual skidders, not the fellers, the guys that were doing the skidding and the bucking, they were just salt to the earth, and they would bust a truckload of firewood every day with the butt offs and some of
Okay.
and take it out of there because that was the way they could actually make some extra money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, this is 24 years ago. I have a feeling there was probably not a lot of workers' comp being taken care of, probably not a lot of reporting going on, a lot of stuff under the table there when it came to that. But yeah, they had to buy me a mailbox, and they just said we're just going to buy it when we're done because we're keep running into it.
That's
So,
great.
yeah, a little bit of a horror story there, but yeah.
Oh
But
man.
so okay, you said something, and I kind of stuck a mental pin in this when you talked about protecting the trees from
Yeah.
cattle and all that stuff. And
Hmm.
and I know a lot of people listening right now that heard you say that. It's like, well, wait a minute, we're talking about pigs on the Pastured Pig podcast. So let's do this. Let's thread this needle here. So talk
Hmm.
about
Yeah.
we're going to talk about how to transition over into pigs and how you guys are exploring that. But first of all, let's talk about the benefits, because there's something you kind of point out on your website that I think is key, is the benefits of implementing silvopasture when it comes to a grazing operation. And we'll use that grazing term broadly here, and then we'll kind of drill down into how you guys are transitioning to pigs. So first of all, give me that.
Perfect.
I think there's 4 or 5 key points that you guys exhibit on the site about why silvopasture for grazers is a good idea.
Yeah. Yep. So what brings most folks to us is shade, right? So livestock, whether it's your ruminants or your monogastrics out on pasture, they need shade, right? They need to feel comfortable. So that's what brings most folks to us, is wanting to provide shade in a way that is distributed, in a way that they have shade access in every paddock, rather than having to hit certain paddocks really, really hard during the summer months, that kind of thing. Then the second one is winter feed. So we want to select trees that are going to produce feed during the time of the year when there's no other feed available, right? So for our ruminants, that mostly looks like honey locusts and persimmons. So honey locusts have these really large, high sugar pods that are going to drop during November, December, January. So those times of the month where we don't have a lot of feed on the pasture, and we want the additional energy coming from those pods to provide the energy that livestock need in order to keep warm. And then similar for persimmons, we want those fruits that are dropping. There's cultivars that'll drop as early as August. There are cultivars that'll drop as late as February, and anywhere in between. So we want to select trees that are going to make that additional energy available at critical times of the year. Then we talk about leaf fodder as well. So having a bank of tree fodder so that you can access that during a summer slump, during a drought, or to provide additional stockpile as you're going into in the fall. Like right now would be a nice time to cut that fodder before we're going into fall, and provide a little bit of extra supplementation for livestock, so you can stockpile more of your forages. So if you're in a drought, for instance, or if you're even in a normal summer slump, and your forages stop growing, your cool season forages stop growing, and sometimes they'll go brown. Even in almost the worst drought, your trees will still be green because they can access moisture, they can access water that your forages are not able to. So we want to think about those as a bank of reserves of fodder, that thing that can be fed to livestock. And then the last one that we highlight is windbreak. We don't do a lot of windbreaks for our clients here in this area. A lot of them are dairies, and if they're not a dairy currently, they often are on a farm that used to be a dairy. So they can bring them into a barn. If there's a winter storm or such, they can bring them into a barn to feed them, to ride out a storm, that kind of thing. But in areas where you don't have a barn to bring them into, or if you're out on a larger acreage, having a windbreak can be very, very valuable for survival in an extreme storm, especially if someone's running sheep and they're lambing out of season, and those lambs are particularly susceptible to cold and to wind. And then also just to increase your feed efficiency. There's a lot of feed energy that gets used and wasted because of livestock being too cold during some of the winter months, and too cold and wet in particular. That could be avoided by having really solid windbreaks around the farm in strategic places. So those are the 4 main benefits to farmers that we look at. And then we also want to integrate trees that are potentially fixing nitrogen, like a black locust, or they are bringing other kind of ecosystem services to the table, whether it's if you're a beekeeper, like having black locust and basswood trees planted so that you have really nice food for your bees, or just having more native trees so that you can create a more resilient and biodiverse native ecosystem. So that's kind of the suite of goals that we look to achieve for farmers, depending on what they want to have on their farm.
I like that. I really you got my attention there. I really like the function stacking element there. Yeah, it definitely has a permaculture flavor to it to say, this specific tree is going to allow you to produce, like you said, nitrogen fixing, those type of things. But if you're polyculture and a lot of these, and you're doing bees, you're doing honey, that type of thing.
Hmm.
There's a multi-purpose type of situation. And then, of course, when I think of locust, I think of potential fence post on down the road. I think of
Yep,
all the coppicing opportunities you have there with that. It's yeah, my goodness, firewood
you
potential,
got it.
all of that stuff. It's great to look and say, okay, here's one species of tree that if we plant, then we're going to have all these benefits from it. And you said another thing there too. I really like the different cultivars, and that's where that your guys' experience, I'm sure, really comes in great to say, hey, if we're going to do persimmons and we've got a variety of cultivars, we're going to have stuff that's going to be dropping because we
Hmm.
do this eclectic. We specifically choose these cultivars, then we're going to have crop from September all the way through February that's going to be falling on the ground versus just saying, well,
Exactly.
let's get 50 of these specific cultivar and bang, the loads drop there in September and you've got nothing else
Hmm.
for the fall. That's
Yep,
fantastic.
exactly. And in many cases right now, so rather than dig, I could really dive really deep into this, but I'll try to keep it at surface level. But for persimmons, mulberries, and honey locust, those three species have male and female on flowers on different trees, right? So if you plant a seedling, you're going to get either a male or a female, and only the females are going to yield you the fruit that you want. So right there is a huge opportunity by being able to clonally propagate trees. Then you're able to decide, then you're able to get all female trees that are all going to have pods or fruits. And then we can start talking about uh, cultivars within those too, and saying like if you're a hog operation that you don't have any hogs past November, well then let's not plant any persimmons that are going to drop in December, right? Let's plant them all in that earlier month. And if you have ruminants and you rotate them slowly around your farm every 30, 40, 50 days, well, we probably want to have late dropping persimmons in that case because those are going to drop during a time of year when they're not going to perish as quickly. So if a persimmon drops in August, it's going to be gone within 10, 15 days. But if it drops in December when it's cold and it's frozen, well, it might be still good on the ground by the time those livestock come through. So there's so many different layers here that we want to consider, and knowing exactly what we're working with, the cultivar, the drop time is key, and that's something that we're building the ability to do in the years ahead.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. That's great. Well, I want to talk about one other benefit, and this is since I've got an expert here that I can actually ask, and see if you've run into this before, and maybe it's a
Hmm.
benefit. But so a farm down in Florida, Live Oak area there, I just remember watching something specific about. Now he was dealing with a lot of cattle in the silvopasture situation, and he said one of the key benefits they've discovered is pest control when it came to
Hmm.
flies.
Hmm.
Falls of now, granted, that may be unique to Florida where spiders grow the size of saucers down there, but talking about this ecosystem and this environment,
Hmm.
the tree canopy for these spiders to build their webs, and then he's just thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of spiders in the canopy, so that as the cattle are meandering through this canopy and the flies are bothering them, a lot of them are getting snagged by the
I
spider.
love it.
And just not having those trees there, of course, there would not be an opportunity
Hmm.
for those spiders to be hanging out above the cattle as they walk through. Have you
Hmm.
run into that? Have you seen anything like that before?
I can't say that we've run into that yet, but I will say that there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of nuanced new opportunities or new learnings to figure out in the years ahead as we start to integrate trees into pastures on a larger landscape, on a larger scale. And then hopefully we'll start to get universities and other institutions involved who can really dig in and study those things. One of the troubles that we run into is there's just not a whole lot of research into this space. And it's largely because if you're a university, if you're a grad student and you have 2 or 3 years to do your research, well, you don't have time to plant these trees and then research them, right?
Right, right.
That's what we're doing. And so now there's going to be plenty of opportunities for grad students to come out and do research on spiders and fly control and all kinds of different things in a silvopasture context. So I'm really looking forward to that. With one interesting concept about silvopasture that makes it so unique is that it's an ecotone, right? So you're integrating two different ecosystems or multiple different ecosystems into one place. So you have your grassland ecosystem and you have your forest ecosystem, and you're kind of blending the two together, and where you have species that might thrive in a grassland or might thrive in a forest, but you're creating habitat for both of those in one place. And that mashup creates a whole lot of new opportunities for those species, like for those spiders or for birds that need a tree to dwell in or need a tree to perch on, and otherwise they might not be able to be there in order to control flies for your cattle.
Yeah, awesome, excellent. Yeah, I love that idea of just like you said, just giving the opportunity for more research to be done, because there's so many drill down opportunities here to say, hey, we can come into an established silvopasture that's been engineered by you guys 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and we can
Mm-hmm.
start extracting data that we couldn't have extracted before. So now having that opportunity and that educational mindset to say, not only are we going to see this do what it needs to do, but we're going to give opportunity for the next generation or those to come in and just kind of stand on the shoulders of each other to say,
Mm-hmm.
keep building on that. I love that. Love that.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's, a half hour in, we probably need to talk about the application. So let's do this. So the $20,000 question, when it comes to protecting saplings or newly planted
Yeah.
trees from ruminants, yeah, there's a challenge there, of course. But we pig farmers know that, okay, that challenge, you multiply that by 10 when it comes to keeping
Mm-hmm.
pigs from tearing that up. So
Yeah.
so you say you guys are kind of moving into that area now. What are you seeing there when it comes to the application to pigs, but then also the challenges that pigs bring to the table?
Yeah. So I'll describe what we've done for ruminants and our basic system that we've developed that works really well there. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're looking at for hogs in particular. So the basic system that we've developed that works really nicely is we use a 6 foot tall tree tube, and it's made by a company called Plantra. They're based out of Minnesota. So it's a 6 foot tall plastic tube, and it has a fiberglass stake on the inside. And the beauty about that system is that those are both electrical insulators. So then we can run electric fencing along those tubes. So the tube itself provides protection against browse by livestock or deer. And then we are protecting that tube because mostly we're working with cattle, and a 1,000 pound animal would love to scratch up and push over on the tree shelter. So we protect that tube with electric fencing. And there's a couple different ways that we can set this fencing up, but the most common way that we're doing anymore is we are putting a hole in the top of that tube at 6 feet tall, and we are putting a zip tie through there. And then we're just running a strand of polywire through the top of that tube, and we're connecting the whole row of trees that way. So that way they have access to electric along all of these tree tubes, and then we clip onto that poly wire with an aluminum wire, and we just wrap that around the tree tube. And that means the whole tube is then electrified, so livestock don't rub up on it. And that's proven to be very, very effective for livestock, for cattle in particular. And that's the basic system that we're looking at for hogs as well. But we're going to need to test it. We're going to need to see how this works in different contexts. So we've worked with dozens of cattle producers in order to refine this system. And I'm assuming that we're going to have to refine the system for pigs in particular. I think with pigs, one of the main things is we need to have a good shock, and so that they're not messing with the tree tube. The nice thing is the pigs aren't going to be, they're not going to mess with trees up at 6 foot tall. So it's a much smaller area that we need to then protect. But we need to protect it well. The other thing that could be a challenge with pigs is rooting right around the base of the tree and rooting up those tree roots. Typically, what we do is we put a really nice pile of wood chips around each tree to conserve the moisture, to create a more fungal environment for those tree roots to get established in. And that's going to be more of a challenge with pigs, right? So I'm sure there's different ways around it, whether you're fencing out a small area and electrifying that. That's one option. It seems a little bit just cumbersome management wise. You could also decide, look, I'm not going to have the pigs in this area that I've planted the trees for a year or two, and let those trees get established somewhat before we integrate pigs, because those trees aren't providing any benefit to the pigs yet. So let's just hold off on integrating the pigs in there until those trees are more well established. That might be the best option in many cases, is just excluding those areas from pigs for a little while until those trees get established. But I'm quite confident that there will be ways to integrate pigs into an area with trees, with newly planted trees. Just it'll take some creativity and thoughtfulness on the part of the producer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think you've addressed the key parts there, and I would concur that rooting at the base of the tree is definitely going to be that issue. And in my mind, as you're describing that, I was thinking, okay, if we're planting in berms, or we're doing any type of raised area there that you're planting into, and then putting back the wood chips. Yeah, I know from experience, pigs absolutely love the wood chips because
Mm-hmm.
the grubs that hang out into that, and some of those larger
Mm-hmm.
insects they like to snack on, that's going to be an attractant to them. But I
Mm-hmm.
love what you're saying with the electric, the polywire. It's like a transmission line. You're using
Yeah.
the tree shelters almost like transfer poles,
Yeah.
transmission poles, and then coming down. Um, and there again, also thinking with pigs and these situations, the strategy of planting, at least methodical planting in these rows, or planting in
Mm-hmm.
meandering path, that you're not just trying to tie all these together, just like
Exactly.
would do our utility right of way. But yeah, so in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, yeah, maybe if you were doing like an alleyway type situation, or just a very long berm where you're planting in, then come back with even some basic pig netting, the poly netting that's just
Mm-hmm.
short, and just offset that a bit, and be able to keep them from getting into your wood chip pile, and allowing that to mature. Yeah, definitely electric. I know. So from my experience, just a little bit that I've done. So I cultivate a wild plum that does really. It's a native plum that does really well here on our property.
Nice.
And so I've got the master tree, the parent tree, that just happens to be right on the edge of our pig pasture. And of course, we're on slope, so I've got two strand of electric just on the upslope of the tree,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a place where the pigs like to hang out. So there's a lot of manure that's deposited there, and that tree has just been thriving
Yeah.
and doing great. So I'm propagating the fruit from it, and producing other saplings. Now, genetic variety is a concern, but being able to take those and just plant them along the edge. Same with my mulberry. Plant a mulberry
Mm-hmm.
along the edge, so when we get to the pasture side, the pigs can't have access to it, and forage that falls. Now, granted, we're only getting at most 50% of that forage that's falling, because the other 50% is falling on the other side of the fence.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what I've had to run into so far. And if there's trees that I'm trying to protect, then I've gone in and had to build basically just super heavy duty rub rails. So they basically,
Mm-hmm.
slabs from the mill, and coming in and just setting a ring around that tree to say, okay, we're going to do what we can to keep the pigs from coming in here and grubbing that
Mm-hmm.
out until it gets.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely a challenge there, but I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with that and some of the data you get as you get deeper into that process.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. So let's do this. So we've got, I want to be sensitive to your time here. We're getting close to that 45-minute mark. Let,
Well, I've got time if we want to go a little bit long.
okay, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about implementation. So
Yeah.
um I think we've probably, and again, pardon the pun here, planted some seeds in the mind of all of our people here that are listening. And they probably think, okay, what's the application for me?
Hmm.
How do I do that? Um, where to start? So, I'm always a, date before you get married kind of guy. And a lot of us on the our audience here, um, not flush with budget.
Hmm. Hmm.
How do we date this process?
Yeah.
Maybe calling you guys out or doing a video conference or something like that. But where do we start?
Hmm.
Say, I need to know what to do first to see if it's even worth your time or my time to pick
Hmm.
up the phone and call you guys.
Yeah.
What would you
Yeah.
recommend?
Yeah. So I fully agree with you, especially when we're talking about planting trees into pastures. Like this is a long-term investment, right? So we want to do our due diligence on the front end, make sure that we're going to do this right, and make sure it's worth our time. So the best thing that I can do is tell people go to our website, treesforgrazers.com. There's a ton of resources there, all for free. And then if you want to really dive deep into this, we have our book called The Grazer's Guide to Trees, and that it gives a full layout of all of the reasons to do silvopasture, and then it gives you a step-by-step guide on how to establish trees in a pasture and some work on different species, all kinds of stuff. So that's the starting point that we recommend folks if you really want to go deep into this and get a good foundational understanding is read that first. And then if you have questions about how you want to integrate that on your operation, then call us and we can do consulting then about how this theory then applies in practice to your farm, your operation. Another book that I would recommend to folks is called Tree Crops by J. Russell Smith. Troy, have you come across this book yet?
That
Oh,
has never, no, it doesn't ring a bell with me.
I highly recommend it.
I'll do.
So what this is J. Russell Smith traveled all around the country and around the world back in the 1920s and researched how people were using trees in agricultural systems, both here in the United States and around the world. In China, he went to Spain, he went to Italy, um, and this is the summary of what he found on all kinds of tree crops and what he writes about mulberries and persimmons in particularly, and then oaks as well, and how they relate to pigs is just fantastic. And he describes how in the South in particular, it was very common for hog farmers to plant mulberry trees in their pastures, or when they were thinning the woods to create a pig silvopasture, they would keep the persimmon trees, they would keep the plums, they would keep the wild mulberries, and that those trees they weren't just providing a little supplement. Like in many cases, they were providing the bulk of the feed for these hogs over long periods of time, over months and months of the growing season. These fruits were providing the bulk of their feed. Like mulberries, it was commonly understood that one nice mulberry tree would feed one hog for the course of the whole fruiting season. So whether that was, in many cases, if with an ever-bearing mulberry, that was 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
So a really significant amount of feed. And it's just a wonderful book that I go to again and again. So I highly recommend that book, Tree Crops. It's available for free. There's free PDFs available online.
Awesome.
So those are resources to really dig into, to get an understanding for how this works. And then I would say start really small. So start with 10 trees. Get those established on your farm. See how that works for you. See how that works with your rotations, how you manage your pastures, how you manage your livestock. I'd say start with trees that are easy to work with, Right now, as far as things that are readily available, I'd say chestnuts are a good way to go. Apples are another one where the genetics are out there. There's good genetics out there for both of those tree crops, and they're fairly easy to work with. And then over time, what we're working on at Trees for Grazers is we're working on clonal propagation of mulberries, of persimmons, and those two in particular for pigs. And we want to have those available, nice, beautiful, large stock available at wholesale prices that are a fraction of what they are right now. So that's coming up in the years ahead. And you probably want to wait for that rather than buy a seedling because you don't know the qualities of that. And half of them are going to be male trees that aren't going to do anything. So start out with like chestnuts and apples and those and pears and trees that are easy to work with and locally available. Get 10 of them established, see how you like it, and then go from there.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you pointing out those resources. I think that's and again, I'll double down on this for you guys listening. Really, really check out the website because the blog articles get into this, and it allows you to kind of do that research first and be able to be more informed about it. And I think that's the key, Austin, that you're kind of pointing out here is be a little more educated on the process and the potential for your farm. And then you'll be able to ask the
Hmm.
questions that need to be asked because,
Yes.
kind of right now, a lot of us don't know what we don't know. So we got to get in and plow that ground and be
Yeah.
able to figure out, okay, how's this going to work?
Hmm.
I think that's fascinating because I think of, all the times talking about silvopasture from my perspective, it's been thinning. And of course, Appalachian hardwood forest, it's like, okay, we've got all these mass producing trees. So, all
Hmm.
the oaks, we've got the hickory, we've got the walnut, we got
Hmm.
all this stuff that's throwing down good stuff. But don't think about some of these other things, these forest edge trees like the locust,
Hmm.
those things. And then, of course, flipping that over to say, well, if I'm going to plant something, I'm going to plant an oak or a hickory. My goodness, I'm 10, 15, 20 years out before I see anything falling off of
Yeah.
that tree
Yeah.
to benefit my pigs. So being able to understand the broader variety of things that are there. Now, here's one thing I want to ask you.
Yeah.
And I know this has to play into dairy at some point, but what about flavor profile? So I
Mm.
think there's a concern by dairy farmers to say, wait a minute, you guys are going to come in and be planting a bunch of stuff. I don't want the milk to change flavor.
Hmm.
Wild
Hmm.
onion and all that's a big deal when it
Yeah.
comes to farm. And it's the same with pigs. We
Yeah.
we see, the pigs, that protein, the lysine, all of those type of things they need to
Hmm.
really put on weight, but then the flavor profile, how that's affected. I know when I finish hogs in the woods in the fall and there's a good mass season, it shows up in the finished
Hmm.
final product. So how you guys address that, A, for the milk, and then B, looking forward into pigs?
Yeah. Well, I'd say on the ruminant side, on the dairy side in particular, we haven't yet gotten to the place where the trees that we've been planting are yielding significant amounts of pods or fruits. So that's something that is yet to be determined. But like honey locust pods, I can eat them and they're tasty, they're sweet. Persimmons are sweet. So I don't see a ton of downside in what we're planting now. If we were planting onion flavored tree crops, that could be a different story, right? But everything that we're planting for those livestock is sweet, has a nice flavor profile. So I don't think it's going to create any negative impacts on hogs. It's going to be really interesting once we're at that point where we have farms that are producing have mulberry finished hogs, and we a lot of this we think about poultry as well because they're very similar in their nutritional requirements. So mulberry finished broilers or persimmon finished turkeys. These are all things that I'm really excited to see. I think about the Iberian ham, right? And how that is some of the most prized, most valuable meat in the world, and that's acorn finished hogs, right? So I think we could have the opportunity to replicate that and have something similar where we have tree crop finished hams, tree crop finished hogs, and I have a hard time thinking that the flavor is going to be negatively affected by something like a mulberry, something with a nice sweet, nice flavor to it, or a persimmon fruit or anything like that. And so I think what will come out of this is that we're going to have the ability to finish hogs on certain tree crops and get like a unique, a seasonal variety, right? Available only now for a limited time, persimmon
Right.
finished hogs,
Yeah.
or mulberry finished, and have this unique thing to offer that no one else at the farmers market is offering.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's funny that that does creep into my mind. My pigs love poison ivy, and I mean all pigs love poison ivy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just amazing how much this farm can grow poison ivy if I could sell it. And yeah, so I start to wonder, it's like, okay, how does that affect,
Oh,
if
that's
they're
interesting.
all these green shoots that they're getting into, especially as we move them around into new areas where they haven't had a chance to forage that yet, all those green shoots. And it's like, wow, okay, is that going to negatively affect? But yeah, I've yet to run into anything. And I think too that also, I would assume same with beef, that's a lot of that's going to be based on the genetics of the animal itself.
Hmm.
Certain genetics that are more susceptible to that stuff.
Hmm.
Because we deal with heritage pigs on our place. They're used to more of an eclectic forage. They're not bred where the genetic line is so specific that hey, they
Hmm.
respond well to this engineered feed and this type of
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah,
I think that comes
exactly.
into play as well. But like I say, just an
Hmm.
incredible opportunity to harvest even more data as we get into this and just see what it's going to produce. You really, man, you really got my brain clicking on broilers. We're rounding out our last batch of broilers right now for the year. And of course, pastured broilers is what everybody does. So,
Hmm.
grasses, oh my goodness, all the different grasses that we have, but not even thinking about, what if instead of running them on the pasture in my tractors, the little drag pens, that we then take our poultry netting for protection and move them into some forest
Hmm.
areas
Hmm.
or into areas where I've got mulberry and I've got plum and those type of things
Yeah.
producing, and how that could affect not only feed cost, which is the biggest issue
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
broilers, but
Yep.
also flavor profile and then of course weight gain, all the things we want from that to the positive.
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
fantastic.
As we're looking at this, based on, and a lot of this is based on really old information that was collected pre-World War II, pre like the industrialization, the mechanization, and the chemicalization of agriculture. A lot of this is really just being resurrected from almost 100 years ago. But the picture that we're able to paint so far is I think we should be able to reduce feed costs and also create a product that is unique and should be able to like earn more money if you sell it. So like this, the upside, I think the upside of silvopasture for hogs and silvopasture for poultry is higher than silvopasture for ruminants because with ruminants your land already produces all of the forages that they need, right? That's their main feed is their forages right there, and that's produced for free. You have to buy the land, but it's produced for free, right?
Right.
Um, Whereas for monogastrics, like most of that feed is being imported. You're having to go out and buy it from the feed mill, import it onto your farm, and that costs a pretty penny. But if we can start to create ecosystems on our farms that are producing their own feed for our own livestock, well, that just completely shifts the game and means that your farm no longer has to be as dependent on imported feed. You can create your own and have that resiliency. And also, we're creating ecosystems that actually make sense for these livestock. Like chickens are, they're not domesticated prairie chickens, right? They're domesticated jungle fowl. Like that's where they want to be. That's where they
Right.
feel safe and secure, and they want to roam. And the hogs come from wild boar. Like that's they want to be in the woods. They want to be in these areas with trees, whether it's savanna ecosystem or the woods or the woods edge. Like that's the ecosystem that makes sense for them. So I'm really looking at silvopasture as just a way for us to create whole farm ecosystems that work for livestock.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And my goodness, you planted another bug in my head here. So thinking about, when I wear my pastured pig podcast hat, we're talking usually production level type stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
to some of the homesteaders a little bit. But then at Red Tool House with the YouTube channel, it's definitely more homesteading related.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the conference here in a couple days, but thinking about your aspect of scaling up, so scale this up for dairy, scale this up for any producer, but you got me thinking about scaling down to
Oh
say,
yeah.
hey, what about that family that, okay, I just need 2 or 3 hogs for the year to feed my family.
Perfect.
Feed cost, of course, really becomes the biggest expense because they're not getting any bulk purchase opportunities. But they say, well, I've got time, I've got the interest and try to be more self-reliant on these
Mm-hmm.
type of things. Bang, here you come with your guys' expertise to say, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
here's all you need. You
Yeah.
need maybe 20 trees max in
Mm-hmm.
your area to finish out 3 hogs to cover
Yeah.
all these benefits that we've talked about. I love that, man. That has
Mm-hmm.
a lot of potential. I could see where you'd be consulting on that level with just here's a blueprint to follow, and then here's even a kit. Here's your
Mm-hmm.
pig kit, and we'll send you 20 trees and plans and all that. Yeah, fantastic. I love it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Hogs, I think hogs and chickens, like those scale down really easily, right? Where like most people don't have one cow or two
Right,
cows.
right,
We're mostly working with commercial dairies. They're small commercial dairies, but that's what they do. Whereas these hog and poultry systems really scale down nicely. I have just a handful of chickens here at my place, but I've planted some dwarf evergreen mulberries for them. And in one year they grew 7 feet tall.
yeah, yeah,
And that's like in and of itself has having a canopy, like that's nice. But now I know that they're going to be supplemented with some mulberry fruit for 2 months out of the year going forward. So that's like it's really simple to integrate on a small scale, just a handful of these trees. And a lot of them, the nice thing about integrating trees for monogastrics, your poultry, your hogs, is we're also monogastrics, right? Like
right,
all of the stuff that hogs can eat, we can eat too. So if
absolutely.
I can plant my apples, my pears, my chestnuts, my walnuts, hickories, mulberries, all of these things for hogs, and I can take the best of it, and I can let the hogs have whatever else.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like these guys up in New England that have just all these apple trees everywhere. I just so jealous. I'm like, man, you could, yeah, with all these apples just growing everywhere on some of this old land. It's
Hmm.
and you have an incredible finish opportunity for your hogs there.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic.
Hmm.
Well, Austin, this has been great, great conversation. Really appreciate you coming on. How if people want to learn more about you, obviously we've talked about the website already, but let's revisit that. What are
Yeah.
give me the website URL and any other social media or any other way people can reach out and find more about you guys.
Yeah. Our website is treesforgrazers.com. And I would suggest that people hop on the newsletter, like sign up for the newsletter. We don't send out a ton of them, but that is how we keep people up to date on if we have tree sales coming up, or if we have a new resource coming out, or if there's funding resources that we know of, whether that's NRCS or there's a private source of funding that's opened up. Like that's how we keep people informed about all things silvopasture and new opportunities that are coming out. So I would highly recommend people do that in order to stay up to date on what's happening in the silvopasture world.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we had a guy on a couple months ago. He had a SARE grant, and he was doing research with planting trees
Hmm.
in the berms that the pigs make along the forest edge. So
Hmm.
it's pretty
Hmm.
cool.
I love it.
Awesome.
And I'll note too, for on that Sarah note, is if there are folks listening who are interested in providing silvopasture services as a business, that's something that we're looking to get more people into. We're based in our area. We can serve a couple hours around us. But my goal is that every area, farmers would have someone in their region who can help them get silvopasture established, who can be the consultants, who can help them find funding, who can help them identify the right plant material, the right tree stock, and that kind of thing. So we have a SARE grant to support professionals to get into providing services for silvopasture. So we have our training coming up in November. The details are on our website. And I think it would be a really good fit for folks who are, say, farming part-time and they want an additional income stream. It's kind of a farm-based income stream. They're able to do it from their farm and then serve other people in their communities. So that's something that I'm trying to get out there more, and get more people to provide those services to farmers in their regions.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, great. Well, man, it's been great talking with you. In fact, I'm anxious to talk to you in the future. I think we can keep some conversation going here and just see how things are unfolding for you guys and just how this whole element is progressing. Fantastic stuff.
Sounds good. I look forward to round 2.
All right, man. Well, I pray you have a great day and appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Troy.
All right. Take care.
Well, all right. Well, I really appreciate Austin coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed his conversation, his perspective on this stuff. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Silvopasture. So I'm going to put a link below to his website down in the show notes so you can be sure to check that out. And maybe that's a good fit for you guys. Now, as you mentioned, he's pretty regional, but also looking at, I really like the idea of the kind of the educational path they're going there, that if you just want to get some insight or get some experience or some training, then maybe you too could even offer this type of service in your area. So they're really about spreading that education and getting more people involved with this concept. Really, really like it. And man, just in the hour we talked about, I love getting deeper into some of the trees I wouldn't even considered when it would come to Silvopasture. Again, I just keep thinking of those protein trees, and I do have some mulberry we've been playing around with, but would not have thought of some of those other trees that are producing the seed pods that, in my mind, are really not edible. But it's really neat to see that. And then, of course, even the certain types of cultivars that fruit at a certain time of the fall. So you scatter that out. So you've got production longer for your pigs to enjoy as you're finishing them out over the fall months. Really neat stuff. Well, I hope you guys are okay with this new format. I hope you like it. I think it's going to give everybody options. So if you don't like one, you can go look at the other and try that out. But give me feedback. Troy at redtoolhouse.com. Let me know what you think. And we're seeing some things we're going to have to improve on. I think I'm going to have to upgrade my mic. My mic is more of a mic that's made to be a close talking mic like this, but that doesn't work well for video because you see way too much of my forehead. And then of course even the video itself, we may upgrade to a specific camera. Right now we're just using the onboard camera on the Mac. So it is what it is. And then now I'm even looking at the backdrop behind me. So I may have opened Pandora's box here. But I think, like I said, I think this is going to hopefully get us in front of more people, let YouTube do its thing, and then hopefully just give you guys options to check out what format you're interested in. Well, again, consider supporting us on Patreon. There'll be links in the show notes about that as well. And as always, if you would like to be on the show, if you would like to be a guest, or you'd like to suggest somebody to be on the show, just go to thepasturedpig.com, use our contact form. If you want to be on the podcast yourself, use the contact form. That's pre-screening information that helps me just understand where you're coming from. Or if you've got any suggestion you want to offer, just email me, Troy at redtoolhouse.com. All right, I pray everyone have a great week, and we'll see you next time.